I woke up in a haze, my chest heavy with an unfamiliar ache. The lights above were so bright it felt like they were burning into my skull, and the sterile smell of the hospital room overwhelmed me. I could feel the weight of the sheets on my body, and I shifted slightly, the pain in my chest making itself known. Where was I? What happened? The world around me spun for a moment, and I squeezed my eyes shut to steady myself. It wasn't until I heard the steady beeping of machines that I began to piece together the fragments of memory. Surgery. I had surgery. I had been fighting for my life just days before. The pain that radiated from my chest felt like a reminder of everything that had happened. I gasped, the sharpness catching in my breath, and I tried to sit up, but it was as if my body had forgotten how to move without protest. The feeling was almost foreign, like I had been away for too long. "Mr. Walker, you're awake." A gentle voice spoke from beside me. I turned my head, still hazy, to see a woman in a white coat standing by my bed, a calm expression on her face. I blinked, trying to focus on her. "What happened to me?" I croaked. "You underwent a triple bypass surgery," she explained, her voice steady and professional. "There were some complications during the procedure, and your heart stopped for a moment. But you're stable now. You'll need some recovery time, but everything is going well." Triple bypass? I'd heard of it, of course, but to think it had been done to me. My chest still felt tight, and I could feel the bandages underneath the hospital gown. "How long have I been here?" I asked, my throat dry. 2 days. "You're doing better now, but you'll need to take it easy. We'll get you back to full strength in time." 2 days. 2 days of unconsciousness, lying in a bed with only machines for company. The thought unsettled me, but there was something else weighing on my mind. My family. My daughter, Olivia, and her husband, Darren, were supposed to be here. They should have been the first ones by my side. "Is Olivia here? Or Darren?" I asked, my voice weak. The doctor hesitated for a brief moment before answering, "I believe they'll be here soon. I'll leave you to rest now. Don't hesitate to call if you need anything." She left the room, and I was left with the rhythmic sound of the machines and the loneliness that seemed to grow stronger in the quiet. I reached for my phone, half expecting a flood of messages from Olivia or Darren, but the screen showed nothing. No missed calls. No texts. Nothing. I scrolled back through the family group chat, and the most recent message was from 2 weeks ago. Olivia had sent a picture of her new houseplant. Before that, Darren had asked me to lend him money for a car repair. Neither of them had sent a message asking how I was doing. Not a single word. I sighed deeply, staring at the screen. The pain in my chest flared up again, but it wasn't just physical. Something inside me felt broken in ways I wasn't sure I could mend. A few hours later, Olivia and Darren arrived, but not in the way I had imagined. Olivia came in, glancing at me with a distracted look, while Darren seemed more focused on his phone than on me. "Dad, how are you?" Olivia asked casually, not even sitting down beside me. "I'm fine, just a little sore." "What about you?" I asked, trying to engage. "Busy with work," she replied with a shrug, her attention quickly returning to her phone. Darren nodded in agreement, offering no more than a polite, "Good to see you awake." I forced a smile, but it felt hollow. Was this really happening? Was this how they treated me after everything? After I had nearly died? The weight of their indifference pressed down on me, and I struggled to keep my frustration in check. "I'll be discharged tomorrow," I said, trying to make conversation. "Who's coming to pick me up?" Olivia didn't even look up. "Call a taxi, Dad. I'm in the middle of something important." "Darren will be busy too, right?" Darren nodded without meeting my gaze, tapping away at his phone screen. Yeah, call a cab." It felt like a punch in the gut. They didn't even seem to care that I was coming home after major surgery. No one offered to help, no one seemed concerned. They didn't ask if I was okay, if I needed anything. The cold indifference was suffocating. "I don't understand," I whispered, more to myself than to them. "I'm your father. Your husband. I thought you'd be here for me." They barely acknowledged my words, too absorbed in their own lives. Olivia was still texting, and Darren was scrolling through his feed, oblivious. I tried to swallow the hurt, but it stayed with me, lingering like a heavy shadow. As the evening wore on, I realized something that I had been avoiding for years. This wasn't just about my surgery. This was about the emptiness I had felt for so long. I had given everything for my family, but now I realized I had been forgotten. I had always put their needs before my own, but it felt like they didn't even care. I watched as Olivia and Darren continued to ignore me, and I felt the sting of their abandonment. In that moment, I knew something had to change. But I didn't expect what happened next. Feeling unseen or unheard in your family? You're not alone. Hit subscribe on Dear Karma and leave a comment below about your own experiences with family neglect. Let's talk about how we can stop this cycle and learn to reclaim our lives. The evening passed in a blur of silence and awkwardness. Olivia left early to attend to some things, and Darren soon followed, offering a quick, "See you later," as he disappeared out the door. I lay in bed, alone once again, with only the sounds of the hospital machines to keep me company. I checked my phone again, just to make sure I hadn't missed anything. Still nothing. But as the night wore on, the strangest thing happened. The news came on, and I saw myself on the screen. I froze, my heart skipping a beat as I saw the headline flash across the screen: "Local man donates entire estate after family abandons him in the hospital." I couldn't believe it. There I was, my face staring back at me, as they recounted the story of my surgery and the shocking decision I had made. I had donated everything, the house, the bank accounts, everything I had, because of the way my family had treated me. Have you ever been pushed to a breaking point by those you loved? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. There's more to this story that you won't want to miss. As the segment ended, I couldn't help but wonder, what would Olivia and Darren think when they saw it? The pain was almost unbearable as I lay there, my chest still aching from the surgery, but something else was eating away at me, something deeper than the physical pain. I could hear the quiet beeping of the machines, the sound of the world outside my room moving on, while I was trapped in this sterile, lifeless space. But what hurt the most was the realization of how much I had been taken for granted. My daughter, Olivia, and her husband, Darren, hadn't even spared a thought for me while I was fighting for my life. The news segment had shaken me. I could hardly believe that it was happening, but there I was, my face broadcast across the screen, telling the world about my decision to donate everything I had to charity after my family abandoned me during my surgery. I never expected the cameras to capture me in such a vulnerable state, but somehow, they had. And in a strange way, it felt freeing. The anger I had been holding back for so long was starting to spill over. I had spent my whole life working, sacrificing, giving everything to ensure they had what they needed. And yet, when I needed them the most, they couldn't even be bothered to pick me up from the hospital. Olivia's callousness, Darren's indifference, it all started to feel like a betrayal that was too much to ignore. I lay back on the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. The faint thrum of the heart monitor was the only thing keeping me tethered to this moment. I wondered how long it had taken for Olivia and Darren to see the broadcast, how long before they realized that their actions had consequences. And more importantly, how long it would take for them to come crawling back to me, once they realized that the life they had built off my sacrifices was about to be stripped away. I could already feel the weight of their calls and messages coming. The desperation. The guilt. They'd want something. They'd want me to fix things. But what had they ever done for me? I had given everything, my time, my money, my energy, and for what? For them to ignore me, to treat me as though I was invisible, nothing more than a resource to be used when convenient. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. The door creaked open, and I looked up to see a nurse standing in the doorway, a warm smile on her face. "Mr. Walker," she said cheerfully. "How are you feeling?" I grunted, trying to sit up. "Better, I guess." She took a step forward, adjusting the four-line in my arm. "That's good to hear. We're going to start you on a walking plan soon, get you moving again. Just take it slow." I nodded absently. The idea of moving, of being active again, felt like a distant thought. I didn't care about walking or exercising. What I cared about was the realization that I had spent years being used. My family, Olivia and Darren, had only been interested in what they could get from me. And now that I was in the hospital, needing them, they were nowhere to be found. The nurse finished adjusting the four and turned to leave. But as she was about to close the door, she hesitated. "Mr. Walker, if you need anything at all, don't hesitate to call." I didn't respond, too lost in my thoughts to offer even the slightest acknowledgement. She closed the door quietly behind her, and the room was filled with silence again. It wasn't comforting silence, it was oppressive. Heavy with the weight of everything I had realized in the past few hours. I looked back at my phone. Nothing new. Still no messages from Olivia, no calls from Darren. I couldn't believe it. How had I let it go on this long? How had I let them treat me like this? I'd been blind to their selfishness, their neglect. They didn't care about me. They didn't care if I lived or died. I pulled the sheets up to my chin, trying to block out the thoughts swirling in my head. I wanted to believe that maybe this was just a mistake, that maybe they didn't realize how much they were hurting me. But deep down, I knew the truth. They didn't care. And that realization stung more than any physical pain could. Hours later, the TV was still on in the background. I had barely registered the shows or the news segments. But when the next broadcast came on, I froze. There, on the screen, was the story about me again. It was no longer just a small segment, it was everywhere now. The story was spreading. The news anchor introduced it with an almost sympathetic tone. A local man has made a shocking decision after his family refused to help him following a life-threatening surgery. Now, he's donating everything he owns to charity. My heart skipped a beat as my face flashed on the screen again. This time, it was not just a local news segment. This was bigger. This was real. And in a way, it felt good. It felt right. Finally, the world could see the truth. Finally, people would understand what I had been through. Finally, I wasn't just a father or a husband waiting for attention. I was someone who was taking control of his life and his future. The news segment didn't show Olivia or Darren. It didn't show their indifference, their neglect. It only showed the facts. And for once, I didn't feel invisible. The injustice I had felt for so long was being heard. It wasn't just about the money or the property, it was about the principle. It was about the betrayal I had lived with for too long, the silence that had eaten away at me for years. The phone buzzed beside me again, but I ignored it. I didn't care what they had to say anymore. I didn't care if Olivia or Darren were suddenly filled with guilt. They had made their choice. They had shown me exactly who they were. And now, it was my turn to choose what I wanted. The evening passed slowly, but I wasn't focused on the clock or the time. I was focused on the fact that something inside me had shifted. This wasn't just about a surgery anymore. This was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, my worth. And if the world was going to see that, then so be it. I had nothing left to lose. As the hours passed and I finally drifted off to sleep, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of peace. The kind of peace that comes when you stop fighting for something you'll never get. When you stop trying to please people who will never appreciate you. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living for myself. Tomorrow would be a new day. And tomorrow, I would take the first step toward the rest of my life. The next day, I was discharged from the hospital, but I wasn't in a hurry to leave. The idea of returning home, to that house full of memories, was no longer appealing. It had always been a place where I gave everything, a place where I had sacrificed my own happiness to keep everyone else comfortable. But now, as I left the sterile hospital room and made my way out, I felt the weight of that decision pressing down on me. I was stronger than I had been in days, but there was still a lingering soreness in my chest. As I climbed into the back of the taxi, I couldn't help but feel a sense of detachment. The hospital had been a place of pain, but now, it was a place of refuge compared to what awaited me at home. I told the driver the address, but the words felt foreign, like they didn't belong to me anymore. As the taxi pulled out of the parking lot and onto the busy streets, I thought about the conversation I had with Olivia and Darren just days earlier. Their indifference had stung more than the surgery itself. They hadn't even bothered to come to the hospital when I was fighting for my life. They had been too busy with their own lives. And that was when it hit me, this wasn't just about the surgery. This was about years of being taken for granted, years of being the one who always gave but never received. I glanced out of the window at the passing city streets, the world moving on around me. My life, my entire existence, had been spent keeping the wheels of everyone else's lives moving. But now, those wheels were grinding to a halt. The silence in the back seat of the taxi was deafening, but it wasn't the kind of silence that came from peace. It was the kind of silence that comes from finality. I knew what I had to do. When we pulled up in front of the house, I wasn't sure how I expected it to feel. But as I looked at the house from the back seat of the taxi, I realized something. It wasn't home anymore. It was just a building. A monument to everything I had given up, everything I had sacrificed, and everything that had been taken for granted. I paid the driver and stepped out, the cool air hitting me like a shock. The front door was closed, but there was no welcome. No one came rushing to greet me. I walked up the path to the door, my hand gripping the handle, but I hesitated before opening it. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel the rush of excitement of coming home. I didn't feel the comfort of the familiar. Instead, it felt like I was walking into a foreign place, a place where I didn't belong anymore. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house smelled the same, dusty, old, like it had been sitting and used for years. I walked through the hallway, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet. The living room was just as I remembered it, cluttered with old furniture, books, and magazines strewn across the coffee table. But something was different now. The space felt empty. It felt like an echo of what it used to be. I headed to the kitchen, hoping for some sense of normalcy, but the sight of it made my stomach turn. The counters were covered in dirty dishes, a pizza box left on the table, empty soda cans scattered across the room. This was the place where I had spent so many years cooking, cleaning, trying to keep everything in order. But now it felt like a tomb, a symbol of my exhaustion, my endless effort to keep up with their demands while they did nothing to help. The silence in the house was unbearable. There was no TV blaring in the background, no arguments over money, no calls for help from Olivia or Darren. I walked through the rooms, feeling the weight of everything I had given, only to be left with nothing. No gratitude. No appreciation. I headed upstairs, towards the bedroom I had shared with my wife, Grace, for years. But as I reached the top of the stairs, I stopped. The door to the room was ajar, and the faint sound of conversation filtered through. I could hear Olivia's voice, but there was no warmth in it. It sounded cold, rehearsed, as though she were trying to convince herself of something. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Olivia was sitting on the edge of the bed, her phone in her hand, her eyes glued to the screen. Darren was pacing in the corner, his back to me. They didn't even hear me come in. "I can't believe he's doing this," Olivia said, her voice tinged with frustration. "He's acting like this is all about the money. He's making us look like monsters." Darren sighed, rubbing his forehead. "He's making a big mistake. He can't just throw everything away like that. He's family." Olivia clicked her tongue. "You don't get it, Darren. He's doing this to punish us. He's acting like we owe him something, but we don't. We've been supporting him for years." At the sound of their voices, I felt a strange mix of anger and disbelief. Supporting me? They thought they were supporting me? They had never supported me. It was always the other way around. I cleared my throat, and they both turned to look at me. Olivia's eyes widened in surprise, and Darren's face turned pale as he saw me standing there, stronger than he had expected. "Dad, you're home early," Olivia said, trying to sound casual, but I could hear the nervous edge in her voice. "I'm not home for good, Olivia," I said quietly. "I'm not here to continue playing the part of the dutiful father or husband anymore." Darren opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand to stop him. "I've spent my entire life giving you everything. And now, I realize that I've been nothing more than an afterthought to both of you. I'm done." There was silence in the room, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Olivia's face twisted in confusion, and Darren's eyes narrowed with disbelief. "Dad, Olivia started, but I cut her off. "I'm not interested in your excuses anymore," I said firmly. "You didn't care about me when I needed you. And now you're going to see what it feels like when you've been discarded. I've already made my decision." I turned to leave the room, but Darren stepped forward, blocking my path. "You can't do this. You're not thinking straight," he said, his voice trembling. I looked at him, finally seeing the truth of who he really was. Someone who had never bothered to appreciate the person who had always been there for him. "I've thought about it long enough," I said calmly, my voice steady. "And I'm done." I walked past him, feeling a strange sense of finality. It was over. My life, my family, the sacrifices, it was all in the past now. I sat down in the living room, the room where I had spent so many years of my life, but now it felt like a place I had no claim to anymore. The silence that hung in the air was thick, suffocating. I watched as Olivia and Darren exchanged glances, trying to process what had just happened. The reality of the situation was finally sinking in, and I could see the panic starting to creep across their faces. "You can't just throw everything away, Dad," Olivia finally spoke, her voice shaking with a mix of disbelief and anger. "This isn't you. You've always taken care of us." "Taken care of you?" I repeated, my voice steady but filled with quiet rage. "I've spent my life doing everything for you too, and you can't even give me a single moment when I needed it the most. You couldn't even pick me up from the hospital." Olivia opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, stopping her. "No more excuses. I'm done." I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of everything I had just said, everything I had done. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but the emptiness that replaced it felt just as heavy. This was the end of everything I had known, the end of the life I had lived for so long. No more pretending. No more giving. It was time for me to start living for myself. I turned to Darren, who was standing near the door, his face pale. "You, too, Darren," I said, my voice quiet but resolute. "You've been just as bad. Always asking for money, for help, for favors. But when I needed something, anything, where were you? Nowhere. Darren didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The guilt was written all over his face. He knew exactly what he had done. And he knew that, just like Olivia, there was nothing he could say to undo the years of neglect. "I don't owe you anything anymore," I said, my voice calm, almost too calm. "And neither of you owes me anything. But you can't keep pretending like this is all about the money. This is about respect, and I don't expect any from you anymore." I turned and walked towards the door, not bothering to look back. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to explain myself, to justify my actions. I had done what I needed to do. And now, I was walking away from the past, leaving it behind where it belonged. As I stepped out onto the porch, the cool evening air hit me, and for the first time in a long time, I took a deep breath and felt free. Free from the years of emotional turmoil, free from the weight of unspoken words, and free from the expectations that had been placed on me by people who had never truly cared about me. I looked out across the yard, at the house that had once been a symbol of my sacrifices, my love for my family. But now, it was just a building. A shell of what it used to be. I couldn't stay in this place any longer. It wasn't home anymore. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, scrolling through the contacts until I found the name I was looking for. I dialed the number, and it rang only once before the voice on the other end answered. "Hello? Rebecca, it's me," I said, my voice steady. "I'm ready to take the next step. I'm ready to donate everything." There was a brief silence on the other end before Rebecca spoke, her tone warm but tinged with a hint of surprise. "Are you sure, Mr. Walker? This is a big step. But if you're ready, we can make it happen." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said, the weight of my decision settling around me. "I've spent enough of my life giving to people who only took. Now, it's time for me to do something that matters. Something that's for me, and for others." Rebecca paused again. "All right. I'll get everything started on our end. We'll make sure this legacy is honored." "Thank you," I said, hanging up the phone. I stood there for a moment, looking around at everything that had once been so important to me. The years of hard work, the sacrifices, the love I had given so freely, now all of it would be put to better use. I wasn't doing this out of bitterness or anger. I was doing this because it was the right thing to do. I had spent my life putting everyone else's needs first. Now, I was going to help others in a way that truly mattered. The house, the money, the material things, they didn't mean anything anymore. I had finally realized that the true value of life wasn't in what you had, but in what you gave. And I wasn't going to waste any more time waiting for people who would never appreciate me. I turned away from the house and walked down the street, the cool breeze ruffling my hair. The world was open to me now, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited for what lay ahead. There was so much I still wanted to do, so many things I had put off for far too long. It was time to live for myself. It was time to embrace the second chance I had been given. And as I walked, I couldn't help but think of the people I would meet, the new relationships I would form, and the life I would build. A life that was mine. The road ahead was long, but it was mine to walk. And for the first time, I didn't feel alone. If you've ever felt like your sacrifices went unnoticed or your worth was taken for granted, Dear Karma is here for you. Sometimes, the hardest part is realizing that the life you've been living isn't the one that serves you. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts. This journey of reclaiming yourself isn't over yet.